I only like it when Josh is quiet. That's the most important part. Make sure Josh stays quiet.
We all like that too. Everybody else.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
We are live on audio.
We have
God.
a fantastic.
What an august crew.
Oh no, guys. Hold on.
August is such a good, like, deeply Savannah, Georgia word.
Whoa, Georgia. Okay, yes.
It gives me very, like, Savannah, Georgia accent. Like, that's all I can hear when I hear that word.
So, Cameron, what do we have to do to get you a proper PC where you can be landscape orientation like everyone else on the stream?
Any amount of money.
So we're doing a charity stream tonight.
Charity stream.
Yes. The Kickstarter is now open.
I don't want it.
Buy Cameron a PC.
Listen, it's maybe one day.
Maybe. Did you just say maybe one day you can have a computer? Is that really what you said?
Maybe one day I can have a computer. Yes. Here's the thing, John. I have to cause problems for you in some way, shape, or form. And if I'm not in the physical space, I have to do it through video means.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough.
So this is the best solution that I've come to at the moment.
You just have to go to John's house, that's all.
Does your phone
Just
not
kick
just
open
like
the door.
Yeah.
It doesn't automatically do it with Zoom.
Ashlyn, don't get too techie with her. No.
We're gonna
Like,
lose her if you do.
So we know we know with Cameron we have a wordsmith extraordinaire. She is one of the most brilliant. She has an incredible vocabulary. Her mathing is bad. She cannot math at all. Her teching is bad. So to each have their gifts. Yes.
Listen, you give with one hand, you take with the other.
Listen, Cameron, it's okay. You can't be great at everything, okay? Yeah, some flaws.
leave something for the rest of us.
I can't be beautiful and charming and funny and good at math. That's
Exactly.
too much
Fair
to
enough.
ask for.
It's fair enough.
Yes, it is me, Thomas.
Okay, let's watch our preview. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I'm actually kind of nervous, but I'm sure it's going to work out. Here we go.
It's going to be
Good.
fantastic.
Come on, be good, guys. Please be good, please.
Thank you.
You're so good.
Wow.
All right, here we go. The LMA intro video in 3, 2, 1.
Rachel, what's on your chair? Is that like a step? What is it? An elephant?
Yeah, it's a little elephant. Wait, hold up.
Oh my goodness, look at that. So cute.
Yeah, I got it. Oh gosh, I don't even remember when. My father got it for me at some shop. I found it. I love elephants, so the little handles, because it's like a little.
Oh, makes the ears go. That's
Yes. It's very fun.
That's so cute.
And I'll show them. The interest.
I think this intro actually is a great way to start off the conversation tonight because it's all combat, it's war,
Yeah.
and that's part of what we're talking about tonight. Like why in role playing, and there's a reason. Love has no place in the battlefield. Thomas, I'm not sure that's even true.
Agree.
I think there have been some pretty amazing. Yes.
I feel like you should give Thomas a love interest for next.
He already had one. Irda was his love interest. He
What are you talking about then?
he has the default best romance ever on BlueBox. That belongs to Thomas.
For now.
For now.
We're gonna give him a run for his money.
Working on it.
Yeah,
I am the blue.
Let us all cook, John. Let us cook. We'll get there.
That's what I'm afraid of.
3 sessions in on Greyhawk.
Yeah.
You heard it here. He said, "Fight me." Next time you guys see him, you guys all gotta gang up on Thomas.
done.
And you are now heard and seen. All right, welcome to BlueBox, episode 122 of Lore Masters Arcanum. I am blown away to be with this amazing group tonight, and of course we are missing Courtney. Courtney, figuratively speaking minis, had a previous obligation and let us know a couple of days ago, and we have an amazing stand-in tonight, Vivi, who is well known to this crew here tonight. Thank you everyone for joining me, and I would like to start off with quick introductions, go through the crew. Let's start tonight with you, Vivi, and then we'll move up to Manda, Courtney, Manda, Megan, Cameron, Ashlyn, and Rachel. Let's go ahead and kick off the intros, and we'll jump right into the stories tonight.
Hi, I'm Vivi. You can find me at the DM's Quest on Instagram. I've been posting much, but you know, if you want to chat, I'm always there. I am the other Canadian replacement, so that's me. And you can find me on Lore Masters, usually here on Wednesdays.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
We got 3 words in.
Manda, who loves the spotlight.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I can't do this.
All right, let's go to Megan. We'll come back to Manda.
Hi, I'm Meg. You can find me at Biscotti Hottie Cosplay on Instagram or Biscotti Hottie on TikTok. And I cosplay and I play D&D.
Cameron.
Hi, I'm Cameron. I am around here on BlueBox as Dahlia for Tears of Aird. And yeah, that's mostly it, I would say.
No, you're also the DM for the Teddy Bear Picnic, which has become the default most amazing game ever played at BlueBox, Cameron. Everyone's talking about it.
Get out of here. Get out of here, you scamp.
Don't think Jenga will not be appearing at my table soon. I'm going to use that. I like it. It's really fun.
It's terrible and so fun.
Not for TOA,
Make your
right?
friends play it.
Oh, yes, for TOA, yes. All of it. Ashlyn.
I'm Ashlyn. I'm the Dollar Store DM on Instagram and TikTok now because I'm starting to be better at posting. And I play Anala. No, I don't play Anala. I've been making too many Anala Nida edits on our TikTok for
As you
BlueBox
should.
that I just can't get the words out. I play Nida on Greyhawk Awakening on Tuesdays.
And your TikToks are amazing.
They are.
So there was, I don't want to say the words, but there was an old, I forget which Drake song it was, but Keisha, anyway, my Instagram is weak and you know what? And then my TikTok was weak and you have made it so much better. Thank you so much, Ashlyn.
Aw.
Ashlyn, amazing stuff. Rachel.
Hi, folks. I'm Rachel. You probably know me from Sunday's Tears of Aird as Mila, in which we have a good old fun time. I like D&D, and I like video games, and I like these folks. Why don't we get the party
Aw.
started?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. First question. Ready? So it's an open forum tonight. As I've said before, on Throw Dice Like a Girl was one of the most popular LMAs we've ever done. People absolutely love the input of this crew. And tonight I am your host, but you are the stars. Whatever you guys say tonight goes. I want to start off with the question, why is romance important in this game, which began with, well, you know what? Let's do a little Q&A. Meg, what was Gary Gygax's game before D&D?
I bet he did one. I have no doubt about that, actually. I
All
know
right.
for a fact that he did.
He did before. So like how did D&D get started? It was before there was AD&D, basic D&D. There was a game, and I think this is important to understand in how the game got formed. What? Don't put it in the chat,
put
please.
your
No,
hand
stop, Moose, stop, Jeff, stop. What's that?
I said, Thomas, put your hand down.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Rachel, what was the game before D&D? Cameron? Anyone?
Do you know what's funny?
Listen,
I remember you telling me
I've told this before, yes.
question, and I don't remember the answer. Dragon
I have
something?
definitely heard it.
Is it
I have-
chainmail?
Chainmail, yes.
Thank you, Amanda.
I only know because there's a book sitting over there.
So that's, I think this is important for tonight's topic because chainmail was how the game got started. It was a tactical game, much like Warhammer, I think.
That bit. I knew it was more war game.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like very tactical wargaming, battalions and infantry and moving your troops around, which then turned into D&D, and then roleplay came along, and roleplay became the next extension of the game, but it did not start with the broader scope of the human experience. It started with the combat part of the human experience, and I think that's why it's been a very controversial topic because we did not start that way. So opening it now up to, let's go to you, Cameron, as someone who really has pushed into the roleplay element. As you look at the game, why do you think it's important to have romance in roleplay?
I think because, like, when I am really enjoying roleplay the most, it is a vast array of colors of that human experience. There is deep sadness, there is anger, there is delight and joy, there is love, there is loss. I think when, at least for me, I'm not going to speak for everyone, I think you could run a perfectly great game of D&D with no romance. That's also great and good. But for me personally, I love that really broad palette. That's something that really excites me and draws me in and pulls me in deeper into that role play of, like, these options are open. Like, it is just an open path. I could take it if I want to. There are people that I could meet and really cherish and learn to love. And I think that's just so neat that there's such, like, a broad swath of things that you could do. So that for me is, you know, one reason why I'm so drawn to it in this space.
I love that. I think that's the core of tonight, because ultimately you can play a great game of D&D without romance. You can also play a great game of D&D without combat.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Which is what you guys are suckering me into. But
Not necessarily.
but
There will
Start, but maybe.
I love the dual, like, raccoon hands from Rachel.
I know, every time, yes.
Yeah.
So, Vivi, you've had some interesting moments of romance. You've been often, Rizia was a hottie on the stream. Like, everybody liked Rizia.
Agreed.
But like, how can you see the game growing, and how do you do it in a way that honors the people at the table? Because that's such an important part of this.
I think it's in the sense of romance, because Rizia was hit on by a lot of, like, NPCs and stuff like that, and there was subtle hints that were kind of quiet, but, you know, she always said you're not my type or whatever and things like that. So I think playing Rizia as her personality type, it was easier to kind of brush off those, like, little, like, you know, what do they call those little, like, dangles of, like, possibilities of romance. And it was only when Rowan really came around, and even that, like, it was very slow building. And I think it's important to it, depending on the situation. I found it was really important that we not rush it,
Right.
and rush through it and make it kind of force it to happen. There was a lot of times where Hob and I actually had conversations about what we would do or what it would look like, and had plans to have it kind of come about on stream, but it ended up not happening because it just didn't feel natural, it didn't feel right, or it just felt like it was a forced conversation
Right.
to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stop there because I would like others to respond. But honestly, I think where Vivi just hit the forced nature of things sometimes, feeling awkward. How do you know the right way to do it? I'm going to open this up to the panel. Anyone, you guys, this is your show. Take it.
Kind of similar with what Vivi was doing, is you have those conversations outside of the table as well. If it's only done at the table, it often, because there's often time that goes on between, and people kind of stew in what is said in situations, and we're D&D players. We have vivid imaginations. And having a space that you can have those conversations of, hey, if this sort of interaction happened, how would we go about it? Because a lot of the time we feel very nervous when talking about romance, and doing those interpersonal relationships can be a lot more nerve-wracking if it's fully improv at the table. But if you've had the time to kind of process it beforehand, it can make it feel less daunting and a little less forced, because there is an aspect that is already in your head.
Meg?
I think that romance can really raise the stakes in a game, because yes, you have your backstory and you maybe have NPCs that your character has ties to, but having romance, whether it be NPC or PC romance, can add another layer of like seriousness to it, as well as more lighthearted moments, and it gives you something to fight for if maybe you're feeling a little directionless.
Expand on that, like directionless in the game. How can the romance bring you more direction?
Well, it can. Give me a sec. My brain just.
I can come back to you too.
Just give me a sec. I'll write it down. Hold on.
Yeah.
It gives you something to fight for. It gives you something that is worth carrying on for, to go and be with that group. So if you're like for GHA, if Inala didn't have the strong attachment she has to Nida, she probably wouldn't be with this group, because what's the point? To her they look disorganized, she doesn't trust them. She's there to protect Nida.
Right.
So there's and that's a different type of
Don't
that is pulling.
look at her.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and I think too, a lot of times, these are just general statements. This is not every D&D character, but a lot of the times our characters come out of like a dark past.
Right.
And now, what are they? Normally 20-somethings to 30-somethings, typical D&D characters. You put them in an area with a lot of other 20-somethings or 30-somethings.
And they're all so hot.
But like, think about it from a realistic, like, human perspective of like, what are you doing around like your 20s to 30s? A lot of people are looking for some form of deeper intimacy, be it friend groups or, romantic connections, all these different things. This happens like pretty naturally. And like, it happens a lot in, D&D groups. And I think like that sort of like almost natural direction of like, yeah, of course, when you spend a lot of time around, the same people every single day, you might find some things about them quite endearing. And you might find some things quite annoying.
Yes.
And maybe it's both and isn't that love,
Okay, I remembered.
Go ahead.
Maybe, let's say you or even your character, depending on how you're role-playing, is struggling with finding an objective. Like maybe they already completed something that you've planned for their story, and you're trying to find a reason to get them to the next point, Like something that is going to keep them with the party, because if you don't have a reason to stay, then...
So Meg, are you saying death and leveling up is not sufficient for a motivation in life?
It depends on who you are.
And that's the role play aspect.
That's the point. Yeah, I think that's the whole point of tonight's show. Like for some people it is, that for Gary Gygax it was. But I think when we're talking about role play beyond chainmail, right? When we're talking about more than just a strategic tabletop game, then it is about the human experience. And that's, I think, what really drives how you relate with these characters and how you bring your pathos, your energy to the table, your sense of motivation and meaning.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think of like, whenever I think about like my initial forays into like fantasy and what really drew me in, I think of The Princess Bride. And I think about like, from like all the great little fights, all of the witty banter, all this stuff. At the heart of it, it's a pretty simple love story, executed so easily and perfectly. And that to me, like, was what like kind of was my fish hook in. And so like, I think as the game widens out, you're gonna find a lot of people whose like fish hook into D&D was maybe pretty different than yours. And so like, I think that could be some of that reason why like, as this hobby has grown out its root system further and further, it's pulling in all these different people with all these like broad spectrums of interests and things that pull them in. And so, like, I think that's why there's sort of this more pull to, like, romance as, you know, an option on the table where it might not have been, you know, not have been, but not been as much of an interest in the past. That's all I got about that.
No, I'm allowing the silence here for others, but I have so many thoughts.
I mean, I think it was very well said. In my experience, I mean, I've played in games that I've had romances in. I played in games, most of the first games that I ever played didn't have any between any of the characters. I played in games where romances between characters, between NPC, like GM, NPC, and a character. I've had games where romances may have started and then stopped because of in-character reasons, that it just did not fit as well. Once again, it kind of, not necessarily awkward, but just the characters, due to circumstances, it didn't happen. And what I was trying to say earlier, sort of off stream, was what I love about D&D is how it is so customizable. And if someone wants to have romance, they can have romance. And if they don't, they don't. And it's so easy, I think, to... I guess not necessarily easy to communicate, but it is very important to communicate your comfortability with that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think off of that, Rachel, like what we were saying about open conversations, there's even a step before that for romance. And that's session 0, baby.
You
that's
bet your
those
buns.
games. That's all that gear up of, hey, here's a question. Let's talk about, you know, your limits, your veils, your boundaries, all that kind of talk of, hey, is romance at this table something you all are interested in? If some people say yes, some people say no, deeper conversation begins from there. If it's all yeses, people are super into it, you ask more clarifying questions. Okay, do you mean NPCs and PCs? Do you mean PCs hanging out with each other? What do you mean by that? It all starts in session 0. And it's not just romance. It's things like certain levels of violence. It's certain, you know, different topics that could be covered. It's talking about phobias and fears that wouldn't be comfortable having in the game. These session 0s are so crucial. Even when you're dealing with, like, friends that you've been with for a long time, it can be good to re-up and have a new session 0 for any game that you play.
That's okay. Again, I'm trying to be as quiet as possible tonight, which, as you all know, for me is not easy.
Come on in.
But session 0 to me is not an answer. It's one answer. You have to have multiple checkpoints because, again, look at Vivi. She's been playing now in Greyhawk Awakening for 3 years. There is a support group available, Vivi. But as you do this, you might talk about something over 3 hours on a session 0 that you had no concept might occur a year or 2 years later. And you're dead on, Cameron, like NPCs, PCs, the interaction between these characters. Ashlyn, you've been a bit quiet tonight, which is not your normal either. Talk to us about how you see this in the course of a campaign. The session 0, definitely important, but it can't be the end-all be-all. You have to have this interconnectedness with your DM and your players to make sure you're doing it the right way, because you don't want, look, the title of this one is Exploring in D&D Without Making Others Uncomfortable. Or this is from D&D Beyond. Here's another one. This was from Screen Rant, How to Do D&D Romance Right and Not Wrong, or how to do it wrong. So we never talk about this with combat. No one ever says, well, I guess they do maybe, like it could be a little bit too bad. But generally combat is assumed as part of the game. Romance as optional. Ashlyn?
So the biggest thing is checking in as you go, especially after key moments, after big moments. In the same way that if you had a very like heavy session, something that would be just emotionally traumatic for your players, it's a good idea to check in with them. Make sure that everybody's okay. Have a little bit of aftercare after your session. Same thing if there's big romantic moments, whether that's the DM checking in with the player because it was a NPC PC moment, or the players checking in with each other. Unlike combat, this is often something that's collaborative from all aspects. Everyone is responsible for it. If you are partaking in it, you have part of that responsibility. Making sure that because consent has to be consistent and at any point can be taken away, these need to be really important and respected conversations.
Rachel, you look like you're feeling something. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just feeling amen. Everything you said. Yes.
And should we pass an offering plate?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
here we go.
It goes to me having a normal camera.
Exactly. But again, like we don't check in. Honestly, I have checked in a couple of times with very violent combat. We had one where Cameron, her character sliced another character in half after an attack of opportunity, which she critted, didn't really want to. And I do, as a DM, I check in with players, but that's not normally something we expect after combat or after you didn't solve that puzzle and your character got killed. But we do feel the need to check in more with romance. Why is that, Meg?
Well, with combat, it doesn't have any relevance to you necessarily. Like, romance is a lot more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to be vulnerable in real life relationships. So when you are pretending to be another character in a relationship or attempting to be in a relationship with another character, it can be very difficult because usually the people that you're doing scenes with don't know you on that intimate of a level. And it can sometimes be uncomfortable. Whereas combat, there are rules. You know what is expected of you and what the possible outcomes are. And yes, it can be very difficult in a situation like that, or if you deal with your own PC's death. But there is a difference in the emotional variability between the two.
Yeah. Well, and I think off that too of the moments where we often need to check in the most for D&D are going to be, if you're thinking of it like a Venn diagram of things you might actually encounter in real life. I don't routinely, I don't know about you guys, I'm not routinely.
Enter combat, right? Yes, exactly. Cameron, you took the words out of my mouth. That is why, right? Because we're not entering into combat on a regular basis. But the romance
Don't
stuff.
play orcs on the weekend, Cameron, or
If I could have a sword, I would have one. I need one, but they don't want me to have one. I don't know.
No, Cameron, you read my mind. I mean, that's exactly that. Yeah, go ahead.
I think in that center of the Venn diagram, you see things like romance. You see things like intense arguments of when you have two PCs who are diametrically opposed in a lot of different emotional ways, it can be really important to at least for me to tap in and be hey, you know that I care about you as a real human person, and even though I said some things that were hurtful, I hope that you know that I was not intending them to be at you. But I think because a lot of the times people bake in little aspects of themselves into their characters, be it intentional or unintentional.
Right.
Sometimes when, these big things come up of the human experience, there's that level of vulnerability that you were talking about, Meg, that can feel so oh gosh, you've seen too much.
Yeah.
You've seen me, and I don't like that. And that's scary.
Yeah, peeking behind the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
I
Very
think
odd.
that's also why it's really important to have these discussions afterwards too, because like you said, you do tend to invest parts of yourself into these characters. And so whether it be romance or the arguments or really upsetting scenes, there needs to be a cool down period of getting back into your own body and realizing these feelings that these characters are having are not necessarily mine. I don't hold any anger towards this player. My character holds anger towards this character. And same with romance, it might be uncomfortable because you start worrying that oh, am I starting to have feelings for this player if you're not being careful about how you approach it. And that can lead to uncomfortability for everybody at the table.
Right.
Yes, big time. Yeah. And that I think is if I were to make you a flow chart to talk about romance.
Like my grappling chart?
Yes, very much.
Yes, I need a romance grappling chart.
A romance grappling chart.
No, that sounded wrong. I don't mean it that way.
chart.
Sure you didn't, bud.
Don't look at that chart. You start with session 0, then you move on to step 2, which I think is look within yourself. Take a moment and think, are you displacing feelings that you are having onto someone else? And if you are, I would recommend you take steps back, away from doing that at the table.
But is that unique to, I mean, that would be violence too, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And argumentation of like, am I just mad at this other PC right now, so I'm gonna, stir the pot and be mean to them or whatever? It is one of those things where D&D can be a tricky thing in that it gives you something to hide behind sometimes. So I'd always recommend lifting up your own curtains and looking at your own stuff before you go into anything. Of like, if I'm yelling at another PC because I'm mad at them in real life, that's
Right.
not really a great look.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I want to say thank you to Amanda, who's really struggling tonight. I know she's been sick, and Amanda, we appreciate you. If all you do is just sit there and cough tonight, we're still glad you're on. Don't.
Still an honor.
Yes, yeah, it's so good to have you here.
Trying very hard not to cough, and that's making me cough more.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
I know the feeling.
Okay, so I don't know what your timing looks like tonight, guys, but I really want to dive deeply into this. I don't want this to be a very tangentially surface level discussion, because to me this is really important. There's a reason I like all aspects of the human experience in my role play, and it's because I want people to feel at my table. Feeling could be laughter, it can be joy, it can be celebration, it can be pain, it can be sorrow, it can be love. And when they're connected to their characters, that's when they tend to feel. And I don't think you can divorce the human experience of relationship and really get people to feel at the table. Vivi?
No, it makes sense, because even like you say, like D&D as an aspect, it's role playing, right? So, and you say like there's combat, there's this, there's that, there's goals. You write intense backstories, and how can you not have that aspect of romance, the potential of romance, come up in game 2, or want to omit it? Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of it's a well-rounded whole thing. Like you can avoid it if you don't want to have it in your game, but I mean, having it as a part of your game doesn't really take away from the game itself, because it depends on you. And like you say, like all of these fabulous women here have said, checking in and seeing what your limits are and your boundaries and such, and like romance can be a part of D&D, and it doesn't have to be a huge large aspect of it. It can be kind of in the background and in like little moments where you have these little RP moments where it's not as like severely intense. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
You can still have romance in all different spectrums, where it's going from very like mild and there and present but not loud, and to very strong intense romances, like, and again, depending on your players and what they're willing and wanting to do. So
like off of that, an example is I played in a West Marches campaign in which like it was very, very combat centered, and so like the PCs really didn't have a ton of time to like camp and just chat.
Right.
We didn't do shopping episodes. But me and another player, shout out to Garen if you're in here, hi. We started like doing like, text role play, and started like really hitting it off in character. Most of the other PCs in the game weren't like, they were like, oh, they're really good friends, which was really fun to play out of, like, oh, we're a little bit more than that. Most of our stuff took place like kind of off screen mostly, and so it was like very small things when we were in combat of like, you describe a look of anguish as, your person fell in battle, or, running to their side really quickly, quicker than they normally would. These kind of little things that are just like, a little bit of spice just at the top. Not enough to, distress the palate, but I'm starting a cooking show. You're all invited.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great to know.
Romance
But,
is more
yeah.
than just romantic love between two characters. It's also that friendship as well. So I don't think you can have in-depth and compelling roleplay without some form of love, whether it's romantic love or the love that's built between friends.
Amanda, that's so true.
I agree.
Yeah.
And like you say in the campaigns, it kind of it's the driving force of your character, right? Like a lot of what kind of Meg said, like what's okay if there's combat and something's happening and someone's injured and you have two players that are injured, it kind of is the driving force. It's like, well, which character would I run to first? Well, obviously maybe, I have a stronger bond or connection with this person, so I'm going to go over there and help versus going over here and help. So I mean, like, again, bouncing off of what Meg said, it could be a driving force, whether it's just story plot driven or just even combat driven, something like that, like where you would go and who would you help.
Right. Yeah, I mean, these are the drivers of human life, and ultimately when we roleplay, this is, I'm sorry I keep coming back to it, but this is where we got different than Warhammer 40k, Chainmail. These things were more tactical. I'm playing Risk, I'm playing a tabletop. Now when I'm playing D&D, what I consider to be D&D, honestly the kind of D&D I played since I was 9-10 years old, I won't even tell you some of the stuff we did when I was a kid. It was not good. But these are the way we connect with people as human beings, and then it does make the celebration of combat and everything else more meaningful because ultimately we're playing people. We're not playing automatons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it
I also
adds
think
that next level of depth to the character. Like
Mhm.
it makes them well-rounded. And even if you have a character who canonically is aromantic, that's still a point, and that can still be a aspect as long as that player is okay with that being potential conflict between them and NPCs or them and PCs. Like you then get into like the purposeful lack of romance as a character aspect.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And I think D&D is an escape, and I would venture a guess that the majority of people who play D&D are not entirely happy all the time. I would guess that. And I think
Wait,
that,
do you think there are any people that are entirely happy all the time? I'd love to meet them.
some things, I don't have the statistics, but I think that having an outlet where you can craft a love story that you have more control over than you might in real life. A lot of people have their hearts broken, and in a situation like this, you can go through the process of having a character experience these things that maybe you are too nervous to in real life or too heartbroken to again. And I think that having that outlet, and again, there has to be still a separation of yourself and the character, but having that outlet, I think, if it's done right, can only be healthy in a way, like in the same way that any aspect of interpersonal connection in D&D is a good outlet. You learn more about yourself and what you want out of your own life, and so I think to have a game without any sort of connection can be... Sorry, the music keeps cutting in and out. I get distracted.
Oh, is there audio problem for anyone else?
It's mostly because we're hearing it through your audio, so when we're talking,
I think it's a Zoom thing. Yeah, I don't think
it's Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll turn that down a bit here, but it's I think okay for the audience. But thank you, Meg.
But yes, I think I said what I needed to say.
Well, so you said something a moment ago. You said most people that play D&D are not happy all the time, and I was teasing with you a bit, but honestly, you're touching on something which is very true. There are definite ties between people who play role-playing games, imaginative fantasy stories, and I'm sorry, intelligence. Everyone watching tonight, everyone on the show, you're all smart. That is right. It's like you like it's as include
Take the W, baby. Take the W.
Exactly. We all get the dubs.
Congratulations.
Yeah. If you
Can I have that in writing, please, John?
yes, I'll send it to you. So yes, when you're more emotional. The Escapist Society was the name of the group I was in high school with, and it's a way to have that escape. And this again is where I think the difference between physical combat and physical relationships is variant, because I can have relationships in real life. I'm probably not getting away with too much violence in real life, but it still is the it's
we hope so.
Yeah, play football. I know but you have these experiences which are part of what's important to you as a human being. And I do think there is I don't want to call it an ennui or a sense of discontent, but the smarter you are, wisdom brings sadness sometimes. Knowledge brings sadness. It is part of the human experience, and this is how we can express that at times. I don't know if I'm going far afield here, but anyone have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's absolutely like what I was thinking, and yeah.
Well, and I think like just generally, and I feel like I've talked about this on past LMAs, of like D&D gets to be such or can be, when wielded properly, can be such a beautiful space to try on something new or something different to you, or something you didn't get to experience. Maybe like, again, a lot of times people are playing like young characters, and so like maybe it is really special to get to experience like that young love that went well, because sometimes it just sometimes it'd be like that, but sometimes slay a dragon with your beloved, and that's pretty cool too. Sometimes you get to experience loss or a breakup or the loss of a loved one in a place that's safe.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to be afraid, because at the end of the day, your friend who you've made all these memories with, still right there next to you. You didn't lose them, they're still there. But you can kind of obfuscate and try on grief and loss for a little bit of time. And I think that is a hugely important thing. That's what I love so much about D&D, is it is a trial ground for some really big feelings that you can explore in a really like cool. It's fighting with the padding on, of like, you've got all the armor, you've got all the safety that you need. You're not gonna get hurt if you're doing it right. Again, if you didn't follow step 2 of the romance chart.
Yeah, please make sure that's not the romance topic.
Yeah, if you didn't, really look within, and you let some of your own feelings slip in there, then that might be different. But I think it can be such a cool thing, again, when done right. And I'm sure that we'll talk about when it's done wrong. I'm seeing some stuff in chat pop up around that. But again, like, I say this as an encouragement. I feel like last time I saw a couple DMs and GMs talking about like, I feel really nervous about including or even putting the offer on the table of romance. I don't know how I feel about it. Totally fine. That's if you are a DM or a GM who says, no, I've been burned too many times trying this at the table, it makes me uncomfortable personally being there in that space, you are more than allowed to do that as a DM or a GM. What I would recommend is telling those players who maybe do want that, like, hey, keep searching for that table because they're out there, or make that table yourself. Don't be cruel about it, but be encouraging about it, of like, hey, that's not going to fly at this table, and if that deters you from playing, I understand.
Yeah.
Of like, just because you have a your own personal boundaries, let people have theirs too. It's okay. We can all be peaceful here.
Yeah, and beyond the most sort of obvious, tropes, like there are certain boundaries which must exist. We will never respect violence toward people in sexual situations, exploitation of children, like all of these things must be treated as off the table. But within the normal scope of the human experience, and I guess I don't even know how you say normal. I mean, just I think we all have a sense of boundaries, and you want people to be able to enjoy their experience in life in a way that respects and is honoring to others. And that could include difference in preferences. I talked about this at BlueBox Con, and I will be quiet here in a moment again, I'm talking too much, but at BlueBox Con, such a panoply of different people from all sorts of experiences in life and social economic, and I'm sure many of us, if we sat down and we lined out all of our beliefs, would disagree on many things. That's okay. And then when you sit at that table, finding the place that you agree, playing that way, and being respectful. Like it should always be the minimum standard of what everyone at the table is comfortable with. And if someone's not comfortable, then just steer away from it. It's not a.
Mm-hmm. Respect is such an important part of being vulnerable with people at the table and being able to communicate and trust that the other people aren't going to wording. I was going to say, like, respond negatively. Not that it's a bad thing to respond negatively to something, because obviously people have their own preferences and that needs to be communicated, but feeling free to communicate is so important, and feel heard and listened to and respected.
I think too with like D&D, like it's very like nerve-wracking to get into a new group and like RP and like, you know, play a different character with people, and you know it's you're putting yourself, everybody at the table is putting themselves in a vulnerable position, whether it be voices that they're not, you know, that they're trying out that they might not be doing before, or just RPing situations and stuff like that. So, and kind of bouncing off of what Cameron said about RPing and stuff like that, the whole thing about D&D is that you guys are just telling a story together, and you're storytelling together. And when you write a backstory, you're writing that by yourself. And you can have like these intense backstories that you've written yourself, but the beauty of D&D is that you're storytelling together. And when there is this like romance, whatever kind of romance it may look like, and you're able to tell that story with the people at your table, it kind of just intensifies that more than just your backstory that you wrote on your own.
Right.
The story becomes more and becomes a part of this integrated story that everybody at the table has all woven in and together and brought together. So I think that that's kind of the joy of being able to bring those kinds of romances in game versus just saying like, okay, this is my backstory. I had this really intense romance, you know, blah, blah, blah,
right.
blah, back then and this and that. That's one thing, but like bringing it together with everybody else and interweaving it into this whole story is just a whole nother level. So I mean, it's very awesome to be able to have an opportunity to do that. It gives you a lot of space for RPing, and like I said, it doesn't have to be like a huge thing that's like kind of taking over the game,
right.
or you know, no longer it's the forefront of like the session or whatever, things like that, right?
Well said. Twy said in the chat, this is honestly one of the best things I could have read in chat. Thank you, Twy. They had very fun conversations with someone that they did not agree with everything at BlueBox Con. That to me is the nature. Like, you don't have to agree with people, but can we have respectful conversations? That is phenomenal. I'm so glad to hear that. And yes, Rachel, first argument of Kings, there was a lot of arguing there.
I really quick wanted to pop in and say one of my favorite moments from that was Becca played Dygath, who is a chaotic evil. Yeah, evil character, and I was playing a halfling. They wanted all of the short races to be enslaved, essentially. And like halfway through it, Becca leaned over to me. We were sat at the same table, and she was like, I want you to know, like, I don't mean any of this.
Yes, right, yes. We all feel that way, like, yes.
And we, like, communicated back and forth, and, like, no, it's all good. Just part of the game. But, like, just little check-in was so...
Cameron, Rachel, I think I've had some of those check-ins with you guys after streams, haven't I?
Oh, absolutely.
And I was going to say, too, there's normally a thing that we do for Tears of Arid where we just stand in John's front yard. I don't know, between 30 minutes to an hour. And we just kind of debrief the game out.
And I come out and do the Ferris Bueller, like, why are you still here? Go home.
Yes, every time. And it's
great.
Wonderful every time. But, like, one thing right now for Tears of Arid, maybe a couple people have begun, you know, tapping each other on the shoulders, saying some things like, hey, how does your character feel about my character? What's going on here? Let's talk a little bit more about that. Just these initial, like, you don't have to throw down every single, like, this is exactly how I'm feeling. This is exactly what I'm thinking. Like, you could be like, hey, yeah, I see some potential there. Let's keep playing with this. Let's keep seeing. Let's talk a little more. I'm a very straightforward person, and I'm bad at lying, and so I'll just normally tell people exactly what I mean when it is appropriate. So a couple Tears of Aeon players have experienced that just within the past week of me being like, here's all my cards. They are on the table. What are your thoughts and opinions? And it's great fun. It's great fun to be able to be like, oh, my poor character doesn't know this, but the person running their brain does. And what a delight that is. So, yeah.
That's like a third of Manda and I's conversations.
Yeah, it's so fun. Truly so fun.
We definitely haven't shipped a lot of the Greyhawk characters. No.
No.
What?
Not even close.
There are no headcanons.
Definitely not.
There definitely aren't drafts sitting in the BlueBox TikTok.
I'm sure there are not.
Are they headcanons when you make them and you're the character? Like, is that?
They are when they're not my characters.
Okay, that's allowed.
Fair,
That's allowed.
fair.
Go ahead, Meg.
I wasn't gonna say.
Oh,
anything.
you look like you were like, well, sorry, my bad read.
I'm drawing a butterfly.
All right, I have like 20-something questions I've not even started on yet, so we will be asking those.
Okay, let's go.
We're just getting started tonight.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, and thank you for all the chat. That's awesome. Have any of you had a personal experience that influenced how you portrayed romance in one of your games? And again, let's keep things at a certain level. I will never be as graphic with my romance as I am with my violence. It's just, I'm really graphic with my violence. It would get me kicked off Twitch if I were as graphic with my romance. But have you had any sort of real life experiences that then played into your game?
I have never really been in a relationship. So with my character Celia, that was, I kind of put that into her, and just this kind of not knowing where you fit in and not knowing if you're even lovable, and being able to play that out has really, really helped me. I can't even express it, because it's putting your own thoughts outside of yourself and working through them in a safe way, and learning how kind of asinine they sound coming from someone else, because we get so caught up in our own heads that we start believing these things about ourselves. And once we are able to see it vocalized in another perspective, if your friend said the same thing about themselves that you say about yourself, you're like, no. And so it's kind of realizing that internal dialogue and how harmful it truly is.
Meg, I think that's super powerful. Let's stay there for a moment. Yeah, Cameron, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you're putting elements of yourself into your character, and all of your friends that you're playing with are also doing that, there becomes this really wonderful moment where, like you were saying, Meg, you all get to come together to battle probably some of those deeper, darker thoughts that maybe you have had or are currently having. And to be able, because to be with your friends and hanging out and going to get a drink or having dinner and being like, hey, I'm dealing with some self-loathing. Not that you can't do that, and in fact, I do that sometimes. Maybe that's just me. But being able to do that in a place where it's like, hey, we are heroes. And maybe sometimes you're not heroes, maybe sometimes you're villains, but we're heroes, and we're here to fight all kinds of bad. And it's not just the invading army. It's not just the dragon. It's sometimes the beast that we've got within. And so being vulnerable in that way, presenting that, and letting those people who you care about come in and be like, hey, let me get that for you. Let me cut that out of there.
Yeah.
It's I'm sorry, Meg, I do want, you're going to go next, but Cameron, it's sometimes Jameis Hollander, which leaves you in a pigsty, and Yeah, exactly. All right. Go ahead, Meg.
I would do a different action if I could.
Go ahead, Meg.
We're doing that one off screen.
Yes.
I found that for me personally, emotional character arcs are a lot more rewarding than combat arcs. That's just for me. I am not a big fighter. I don't enjoy it as much. And so to be able to see these, your character who in certain aspects is you, and see them overcome these things that you have struggled with, it's so rewarding and it's so validating and hopeful and inspiring.
So this is our own pathology, right? We all have our own. For me, the combat is fun. It's not the most rewarding. Romance is not the most rewarding. The idea that you influence people, that you have uplifting of like saving of villages or inspiring groups of people where you create hope and love. This is what I love to play the game for. It's even less than the combat of the romance, but we each have, to your point, Meg, our own story that we like to tell, and that is we have to respect that in one another, because some people want the violence and the combat, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's that table. Other tables suck you into playing Jane Austen roleplay, and you have to respect that when they do. But each of us, we have the stories that we like to tell, and that's okay. Don't hate someone else's story. We all have these things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But that's truly
and
the
find
wonder
a table
of
that
it.
works for you.
Right.
Yeah. The wonder of it is that like a group of people coming together, each having their own preferences of how to play the game, and collaboratively creating the space where they can all enjoy it and put little bits of themselves and be respectful and trusting towards one another. It's just, I love this game.
Okay, second question. Can any of you tell me a time where the integration of romance really changed the D&D campaign, enriched your memory of the game, brought the players closer together, made the game more meaningful?
I was in, or I guess I am still, it's just a new character because this one died, partly because of the romance. So it's this mega world that has all these different players constantly influencing it. So there's multiple games going every week. And I happened to join a session with some other players that I hadn't played with before. And I just happened to send a message to one of them being like, hey, are you, like, I was playing a flirty bard. Like, are you comfortable with that?
Such a typical trope. Come on.
Well, hers was different. She wasn't so much like flirting to get, like,
okay, yeah.
Get it? She was a performer. She was a dancer.
Okay.
Oh, fun.
I'm sorry, I'm playing glamour bard.
So she was getting, yeah, okay.
Yes,
The best bard.
I just wanted to check in with them, and it turned into me actually joining that party and developing this really deep, intimate romance that started to span universes and caused the death of my character because she was used as like the weakness for this character who was a bit more like main character for this storyline. And it changed a lot of how we dealt with the world, how we interacted with the different stories was because of that relationship.
I love that.
That same character that I was talking about before in the West Marches campaign. West Marches, if you don't know, is like you can play with like as many people as you want. It's almost a rotating cast of adventurers. So like you could have 40 people in the game each week, 6 of them come out to adventure. My character ended up dying fully on an adventure and being reincarnated on that same adventure, and then coming back to town in a completely different body, back to the person who they, were in a relationship with.
I love that.
She was like, well, this is different. And so like, they got to have this kind of tender moment where she like threw on a disguise self and was like, hey, I have to tell you about something that's going to be really hard for you to hear. And like, slowly kind of pulled away that disguise and was like, this is what I look like now. Are you still going to be okay with that? And like, it was this moment of like, their whole dynamic had been built around like telling little lies and actually telling the truth. And he was like, why did you even bother with the disguise? You don't have to lie to me. It's always going to be there. Like, I'm not going anywhere. No, physical change is going to. And it was like such a wonderful moment of like, I think that change could have caused that character so much like strife and turmoil. She was also a glamour bard. So like a little centered around image, maybe. So like an abrupt change.
Unlike all of us, none of us care about our image, right?
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
I'm actually not wearing makeup, so.
No, I don't.
Neither am I.
Heard of makeup.
No, that's
like other girls.
no. That's really. Anyone else on that topic?
So I had a character, but different than was not a bard. She was actually a rogue. And the romance was actually it kind of just came up just out of nowhere, and it was kind of funny because she's just got herself into trouble all the time. And it was actually Rob's character. So Rob's character, we were drinking buddies, and then we were just drinking buddies, we were fine, and then we were on a ship or something like that, and then when she came back to the group, she was just joking around with the rest of the party. She's like, oh yeah, like, we're dating now and this is a thing. And like Rob's character just went with it too, and he's like, oh yeah, and then people didn't believe, or the group didn't believe it at first, and it was just something that was just like they were just being playful, being fun about, and then all of a sudden it just kind of happened to develop into something that was more than just a joke. It came into as just a joke, and she ended up dying because she got mummy rot, and there was no cure.
That happens.
The only way that they could save her, until obviously we leveled up enough to get it, and we just leveled up, so it was next level. It was actually Thomas who would come every morning, and Thomas was my character's cousin. He would actually take the disease from me so that I could get healed and then bring it back. And
wow.
And that was kind of I
love that.
A whole storyline in itself, not just about the romance between the two characters, but involving like the group and stuff like that. And the group was all willing to just dump all their heals on my character every morning. And she had just made this decision that like she didn't want to burden the group, like, because IRL, I knew that she could get healed next level, but she didn't know that herself. Like in character, she didn't know that herself. So she ended up making the decision to kind of put herself in a dangerous position that got her killed, because she was tired of watching everybody do that for her. So that's kind of a different twist on a romance, where it was not something that was like budding or happening. It was just kind of a joke that kind of happened to turn into a romance. And that's talking again about that interweaving of stories. Like, it's no longer just about the romance. It's about now the whole group coming together and mourning. And now, Robert's on a rampage. So because they killed his wife.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep.
And again, like, that wasn't something that was very forefront in the campaign. It was a very battle heavy campaign. And even though you can have a very battle heavy campaign, you can kind of mix that romance in there to varying degrees. Yeah.
Because you want people to feel.
Yeah.
You play D&D to feel something.
Oh, 100%. To cry. Just kidding.
Or to be angry, or to happy. Yes.
Yes.
That's why I do it. I like crying.
Me too.
It's my favorite.
All right. So quickly here, Thomas, I am not the focus of tonight's show, so I'll answer this very quickly and we'll get back to our guests. But definitely the relationship between Alcott and Irda did influence me in Rune Lords, and while it was at the end of the campaign, and so we didn't really have a lot of the unfolding of it, it was, to me, one of the most wonderfully executed, meaningful romances that I have seen played out. The videos that you created, the letters that were written, to me as a DM, that was super rewarding, and knowing that it was everyone at the table felt the same, agreed the same, and then it expanded the story, it was absolutely gorgeous. Loved it. Thank you, Mikey B. Anyone else before I move on to my next question? Because I have many more.
I'll try to make it really quick. in that there was a character I played. She was a Bladesong wizard. During session 0 with my DM, we were going through her backstory, and we ended up like kind of role playing this meeting that she got on this ship. She was going to be working on it for a little bit, and she met this woman, and then there were kind of flirty vibes, and so we kind of looked at each other and we were like, you know what, let's just roll for it, see if like this is something that might happen, see if that's something the character would be interested in, because I was planning on playing her as very much a flirtatious individual. I ended up nat 20 and we ended up getting married, and during the actual campaign, turns out she wasn't who I thought she was. There were a lot of red flags, and we ended up, me and my DM, like in a screaming match at each other.
Oh.
And ended up divorcing in session.
I see. I believe that, Rachel, because
so well.
Rachel, I believe that, because I never would have imagined you could scream at someone until I saw you at BlueBox Con on that Sunday when it was a little bit loud around us, and I tried to say it's a con environment, just relax, and I saw your eyes flash steel, and I knew, I knew I was in danger. I was like, ooh, okay.
It's always the quiet ones.
Yes, always.
Just be prepared. That's all I gotta say.
Hey, so real quick, like to what you were saying, Rachel. Again, I don't bring this up to argue with you. I bring this up because I want to talk about this. I don't actually agree with this point. So if you see it on the screen here, RPG scenes of seduction or flirtation should not be resolved with dice rolls. This came from the Screen Rant. It was a publication from Geek Native, Emily Allen, the creator of a fantasy TPRG. I'm going to read the, keeping our clean stuff on here. Dice rolling RPG mechanics are a poor way to simulate scenes of romance. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, because I think even in scenes of combat, it can be very much my skills versus yours. Why do we sense motive? Why do we have any other emotional or intuitive skill that we can play out, but we can't play this out? We certainly don't want the roll to become compulsion, right? I rolled a nat 20, therefore you must do something with me. No. But shouldn't there be still a place for chance or for the dice to affect this?
That is, once again, another reason why I love D&D is that it is chance. There's so many of the actions that obviously we put so much thought into our characters and the decisions that they make, but ultimately the game is a game of chance. You roll to see what's going to happen. And I find it so fun to leave like important decisions like romance up to the dice, just to see like if by chance this is something that would happen, because I thought it was going to be very unlikely for my character to get married to this random woman that she met on this boat, and then we started talking about it. I rolled that nat 20, and then I was like, we gotta do
married.
it.
I mean, if you didn't roll a nat 20, you could have just gotten engaged. You know what I mean?
We probably would have just dated.
Yeah, exactly. You can.
Yeah.
Just because the roll is the roll doesn't mean that something's set in stone. You
Right.
can still,
Yes,
just like you say,
too.
like you can roll a nat 20 and you can kill them epically, or just kind of stabbed him once and then he just died. Just the last stab or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I think was it Demon Gun said in real, where did he go?
In real life, there are people you can't help
No.
but be attracted to or manipulated by. Oh,
In
sorry.
the spirit of improv, those kinds of dice rolls are opportunities. I like that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Very well said.
I agree.
I definitely
think
like dice
too-
rolls when it's PC NPC.
Yeah.
Particularly, just it is a skill.
But not PC?
Less so with PC.
Because I saw a lot of that with Garrett this weekend, right, Rachel? Like Garrett was a lot of the PC to PC, which I didn't mind, actually. It was interesting,
I
but
love it.
but
It's my preference, and I would love to hear what.
yeah. So Ashlyn, fight.
And it's not that dice rolls don't have an aspect in it, but I think it's much more organic, and it's much more, because these are characters that are constantly around each other, they have more of an opportunity to have these developments grow, as opposed to an NPC. Usually you're only with the NPC for a short period of time. So the dice roll actually is a bit more of a necessity in terms of getting that point across in a quick matter, versus a PC relationship that's happening over sessions, that's happening over a long period of time. And so a lot of those aspects, especially those big moments or like a big realization or a profession of love, I don't think should necessarily be up to chance because those players have been building on
Right.
it the whole time.
Yeah,
It's out of the blue, like I'm suddenly flirting with this person.
No, yes. All right. So I think we need to sit here for a minute. I think all of you have thoughts on this. I do want to read Anna B. Meyer. Anna, thanks so much for being with us tonight. And she
hi,
said,
Anna.
for NPCs, it should be about the dice, but for PCs, that should be up to the player in cases like this. And I agree, except sometimes players like to allow some agency in the dice. So there should still be a boundary, right? Like the dice will not force me someplace I don't want to go. So, for example, I know Daisy Bell has no romantic interest, does not want that at all. Ergo, there is no place the dice should push that character to go. But when you as a player want to allow the dice to tell that improv story, that seems like it's okay as well. So, group, thoughts?
I would like to...
Let's go Meg, then Rachel.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I think that definitely I agree with the probably don't use dice as much for PC romance, but it's one thing to roll and say, okay, I'm going to seduce this character. It's another thing to say, okay, my character really wants to kiss this character. And you roll and see if they like lack the control over themselves to do it, and then you can deal with the repercussions of that whichever way it rolls. But trying to roll to determine what someone else is doing, or trying to goad them into rolling opposite you, and I think in a PC romance especially, it's much better to talk that out and figure that out beforehand.
Okay, others?
I was gonna say off of that, of like, I think of PC to PC relationships of like, yeah, the sense motive and like your bluff checks, that checks out to me. But then I think of like persuade, of like, I think of Daisy Bell and Dahlia's conversation after Dahlia and Click's conversation the night before. Of Daisy Bell was very much so trying to persuade me, like, think differently. And even like with a nat 20, I don't think that would have worked for Dahlia. Like, there's some things where it's like, she would have said things differently. Maybe I would have been like, yeah, roll for it. I'll see if I believe you about it. But like, there are moments where like the story is pulling so strongly in the ways that characters are digging their own graves or resurrection sites. So, there's moments of where it's appropriate. And when I think of like NPCs and PCs, of like, why are we rolling dice there? Of like, to me, a bad roll on a like check to flirt is not necessarily a bad thing, and it does not necessarily mean that you are bad like at doing what you're doing. Maybe that person is just like, you're flirting with a barmaid and you think it's going well, you roll a nat 1, she holds up her hand, she's got a wedding ring, like stuff like that. Of like, you can tell stories like this and you can make it fun, and even if the like there's so many ways that you can make that work, of like, I think that that's a fun thing. If that's not your style at the table, that's also fine. Like, that's also a great way to do it. If you just want it to be like, because there are certain ways that, like, for me personally, if you were to try to flirt with me in a certain subset of ways, I would not be flirted with. I would say, it's been great. But then there are other ones where
when you get squished down to that two-dimensional object, Cameron?
Yeah, exactly that. Where I'm like, I'm no longer interested in this conversation. Adieu. And like, you could run into characters who are like that. Of like, immediately the PC or the NPC is just like, nope, not into it. And that's fun. And then there's the whole other world of like, I think dice rolls can be fun for that NPC bit. To me, they don't necessarily work as much in terms of like persuading for PCs, because like, is it certain verbal stuff that's not going to persuade somebody?
Exactly. And is it fair to say that dice rolls could be, or should be, perhaps, should is a very strong term, but more influential from a PC to NPC, not an NPC back to a PC, unless that PC has sort of agreed and wants that to be, the nature of what's happening. If they're open to being influenced that way, that's fine. But generally speaking, you do not want to take agency away from a character in something like this.
Yeah.
At my table, what we do a lot is, because I have some very creative players, and I have players who, like, one of them has an addiction to pastries. And he came up with a role that he's my auntie. That if they pass a pastry shop, he decided he's going to do a wisdom saving throw to see if he can control that. So
Amazing.
yes, I as the DM. None of that was all his own idea, but I've also had players where they're interacting with each other and they will call roles for each other or be like, hey, I want to roll to do this, or can you roll to do it so I know how I would react based on how well you end up actually talking. And as a DM, I don't mind that at all. I very much encourage my players, like, especially if they're doing something that it's not going to mechanically mess up anything.
Right.
Like, that is your moment. Take your moment.
I agree 1000%. Took the words right out of my mouth. Beautifully said. I was going to give an example of a situation where my campaign, we were saving this girl. She had a relic on her. These are made by the gods. It's a whole event. It only happens once every 100 years. We were trying to save the girl. One of the guys wanted the relic. Out of character, I knew this, but in character, no idea. He comes up to me in the middle of this combat. I'm an air genasi, so in my brain, I have the child. I'm planning on flying up into the air with levitate to get her away from all the chaos and protecting her there. He runs up to me and asks me to hand him over the child. And so I asked him to do a persuasion roll to see, because, you know, I had this plan just to see if that is something that he could persuade my character to do. He rolled quite poorly, sadly. So I didn't. He did end up getting the relic. That's a whole other story. But just using dice in those ways, I love, because especially if I'm on the precipice of a decision that I don't know which direction I want to go, being able to roll for it and be influenced by that is so nice. It's so good, because I'm so indecisive sometimes.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. All the time. Same player also made a straight intelligence check to see if he was smart enough to not go through a portal.
I love it.
It's a great decision-making tool, and it's a great way to help when you're like, as a player, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm trying really hard not to metagame this because I know why you want this.
Yeah.
And it helps eliminate that.
Exactly.
Right, and just like in any other aspect of the game, I may be playing a character which is more intelligent than I am, or has more wisdom than I have, or more charismatic than I have. And so the dice and the stats then sort of influence in a direction. Never again to take away agency from a PC, but you know, I may not be as charismatic as my bard that was being played. So I think this is a really fun topic for us, and I think you guys have handled this well. Thank you very much, all of you. This is really, really well done so far. I do appreciate it. So with that sensitivity and that understanding of what happens at the table, have any of you ever had a situation where you think it was poorly done at your table? Like you felt uncomfortable, you saw a player feel uncomfortable, you saw a DM not handle it correctly, and you know, keep the names out, just situations.
Sure. Same West Marches campaign at the same time that my PC was being kind of, you know, romantically involved with this other PC. We had a new player come in who was playing, he was a cis straight guy playing a female lesbian character, and immediately was coming hard for, like, me. Like, not sure if that was an in-character or out-of-character thing, but it made me pretty uncomfortable. In character, I was able to very quickly be like, hey, I've got a whole other thing going on, and you haven't asked me anything about it, so here's some of those cards on the table. Character's already spoken for. And, you know, kind of, like, got the picture, but, like, still pretty uncomfortable. As, like, an individual, I was able to kind of pretty clearly set that up of, like, hey, no thanks, I'm good.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I ended up bringing it also up with my DM of like, hey, just so you know, this happened. I feel fine still being at the table with this person for the time being, but like, this is my yellow flag.
Right.
Of like, I want you to know that this happened. I don't want this to be something that was, you know, swept under the rug and dismissed. But yeah, eventually that player had another incident like that, and then it was, you're out of the table. And so, yeah, it was uncomfortable, but also like, not too terrible because it was a lot of open communication from a lot of different parties. So.
Well, and it sounds like your DM handled that well, which is good. So, but I think this is the crux of. No, that's not fair. That's not the main. The main crux of this tonight is why I think romance is important in the game, and I really wanted the perspective from women because the female perspective is vastly underrepresented in so much of D&D. It just is, and I really wanted to hear from all of you today. But one of the secondary thoughts is that what's comfortable at one table is not for another, and so in that situation, you had a person who was. It sounds like. I guess it's cis, or I would call it hetero, whatever you want to call it, was trying to reach out with this female character in a way that felt very uncomfortable for you, which I totally get that. Similarly, I've had a situation where a player in that former category, hetero or cis, whatever the term is we want to use, was approached by a female character. It was sort of the opposite scenario, and they were super uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I think all of those things should be respected. Just
absolutely.
This is, and it rarely comes up with combat because no one wants to be stabbed, right? We all you're stabbing me. That's not fun, right? But but understanding that we can respect all these perspectives at a gaming table, and if it's not one that's comfortable for you, then you don't have to be at that table, or a DM should respect that. I think that is where this gets. One of the questions I think, Cameron, you brought up when I showed you my list of questions was, what do you do when it's not comfortable? How do you handle it when a DM or a player doesn't know how to bring this up at a table? I think that is the most thorny question that we're looking at tonight. And so let me open it up to the panel here again. How can we be respectful even to people that maybe they don't want romance at all in their game?
Yeah, so my example from the previous question was actually going to be I done screwed up once.
Okay.
And I hadn't checked in with this player that he was okay with even his character being flirted with by an NPC. I didn't do anything I had an NPC flirt with him. It wasn't a big deal,
right.
So it didn't cause any issue between us. But after he sent me a message like, hey, just a heads up, that's something I'm not comfortable with. And 100%, you back off is what you do. You have that conversation. If something is happening that is uncomfortable from the DM, from another player, whether you're the DM or not, if you are uncomfortable as the DM, that's still a conversation that needs to happen. You are part of that group. And your feelings also matter. And having that open conversation, even if you realize that you've forgotten to get that consent before, if you just adjust that behavior immediately, it's seen, and that trust doesn't get broken.
Yeah.
But when you have situations like what Cameron was talking about, where it doesn't get fixed, that breaks the trust.
Yeah. And I think too of with any difficult topic, at least this has been my experience in life. Maybe other people have had other ones. I'm sure they have. But the idea of anything that sits in the dark continues to rot. Until you bring it into the light, it's not going to get any bit better. And so, if for you as a PC at the table, or for you as the DM around that table, checking in with yourself of doing that thing of hey, is this making me a little uncomfortable? Is the way that, one of the PCs at the table is constantly hitting on every single NPC possible, making me as the DM uncomfortable? Is, have other players started to feel uncomfortable with a PC romance happening? Do those check-ins, and oh no, what has happened? Nothing's happened. Everything's fine. I got scared.
I think she's just coughing. I don't think she's mad at you.
Okay. No, I was like, oh no, I made panic. But that idea of hopefully in those establishing sessions, you created a space that players and DMs alike can feel comfortable bringing up those things. That is, again, why that start is so crucial.
And this is why, I'm sorry, Cameron, I thought you were done.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say otherwise, you can hope that you have a group of sweet, cool individuals who are hey, guess what? That makes me uncomfortable. And you know, that's sick too. Maybe you're like long-term friends with these people and you know that and you know their vibe and you can catch that really, really quick. Maybe you can even read it on people's faces. That's awesome too.
Sure.
But if you as a DM or GM are like, sometimes I have a rough time of telling when people are uncomfortable or not, and by the time that they tell me, it feels like it's too late, and then I feel terrible.
Exactly. Yep.
Try to pre-establish as much as you possibly can.
But again, I want to. The pre-established thing, I agree with completely, but it doesn't work for long-term people change even. Like you might be comfortable with something a year from now you're not comfortable with today. And I think like as a DM and a player group, I know we have the X and the knock on the table and all the other mechanisms, but I still think there is a communication responsibility for everyone at the table. And frankly, we're touching on now why romance doesn't happen a lot at so many D&D games, right? Because it is dangerous. You can really, I'm less likely to have you. Well, unless you're Tim, the ever mysterious Tim is still angry with me because my thief actually robbed his character as a PC in-game. He griped for weeks at me about that. Most people don't take that as seriously as Tim did. And I don't mean to make light of this topic. That's not my point. But my point is I think we're in a danger zone here with this that is different than most of the game. And in some ways that's sad because I do think it's an important part of the human experience, but in other ways it is the opportunity for us to really tell powerful stories and to do so in a way that's really respectful to others.
Also, I just want to point to something that was just said in chat. Demon Gun just said it. A fear of rejection is real even when pretend.
Yep.
And I want to step into this space really quick to be like, hey, do you want to know a really safe place to experience rejection? It is at the table, baby. There is, it can be so cathartic because rejection in real life has a sting to it that can harken back to years and years of pain and anguish. Again, when you're around the table with friends and people that you feel safe around, and maybe something doesn't work out with either like some sort of romance around the table, you're in a place of safety in some ways. And so that rejection has a chance to thrive into something potentially beautiful of like, you know, I think there have been some great stories of rejection within Critical Role. I don't want to do spoilers or anything like that, but if you know, you know. Of like, you know, two characters who end up together and there was another one who was pining away the whole time. And that rejection can hurt, but also there is a side of beauty that can be stepped into from that. At the end of the day, we are collaboratively writing a narrative together. We get to shape what our rejection looks like, what our successes look like. When we get asked, what does it look like? When we're, you know, putting the finishing touches on a bad guy, that's one thing. But here at the table, you get to define what even your rejection looks like. And I think that that's something that we get to pull into our real lives if we try hard enough, which can be really, really cool.
Didn't I do a what does it look like with Garrett this weekend on something that was not combat related? What was that? I seen something he did. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, I don't think only combat needs to be what did it look like. It can be other parts of the game. And so
his insight, like
that, yes.
He was an investigator, so it's like, how does that come to him?
Exactly. And so thank you, Meg and Amanda, for coming back, because I think the narrative was about to be how I have gotten everyone to leave my stream tonight. So, all right. So we have ranged far afield. I will not get to all my questions tonight, which is not surprising.
Shocker.
Shocker. It never happens. But I want to open it up again to the panel, and just there have been many things that we've discussed. Let's come back and let's really ask the most important question of the day, which is, how have I been duped into this?
Because you brought a lot of charismatic and you
you brought a bunch of us together talking about romance.
I said I would play a dwarven cleric, a female dwarf, which I'd never played.
You will. And you will.
I never agreed to. I don't even think it's 280 pages I have to read.
You do not need to read.
No.
There's only a couple you need to read.
I'm teasing, by the way. It actually looks really fun.
It is really cool.
I can give a little bit more insight into how we're going to do this mechanically.
Okay.
I'm only taking from Good Society a few aspects.
Okay.
I'm going to be taking the kind of character creation aspect so you can get a bit more of the RP background, so everybody has little secrets and relationships and things that might bring downfall to your character. And then we'll be doing some of the like letter writing aspect.
Okay. I like writing
For
letters.
everybody in the audience who is coming into this train of thought halfway through, I'm going to be DMing this. Or GMing, I said. Well, but we're using Dungeons and Dragons as the core. So it's still going to be D&D. There will be combat.
How so? How is it still Robert's asking if I agreed to do anything as long as it didn't include dinosaurs, and I might have.
Yeah.
There were jokes about dinosaurs.
Yes, I know. But how is this? How is this really still D&D? And I'm not mad, honestly. It's going to be fun. I love role playing. I love expanding what I'm doing, and even as I'm thinking about this character. Although my 10 court commandments did not seem to go over too well in the Discord chat, I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
I went back and re-listened to the original song, and I'm like, oh, I can see why maybe people do like that too much. But no, it's, I think like it's a fun chance to role play, and so we've got examples of the characters and players. So Ashlyn, how is it still D&D even as we engage with Jane Austen?
Think like Pride and Prejudice, but there's also
Right.
Pride and Prejudice and zombies is a thing that does exist in the world.
Okay.
It's very much so. I'm taking the world that you guys are going to be playing in is actually so I've been running this desert themed campaign for almost 3 years now, and there was an ancient empire that is all lore, and they've only had like 2 sessions that have actually taken place in that world as like backstory bits.
Cool.
And this is actually, you guys are going to be fleshing out this empire and playing in the nobility of an empire. So we need to have those aspects of like your relationships, and what you say and how you act is going to affect how everything is around you. But it's also a high magic empire where everyone is skilled. Like in D&D, I would often have like the king has levels in certain things. They're not just commoners. These are people who have had the access to get trained in martial weaponry. Sorcerers are the main nobility, draconic bloodline sorcerers in particular. So pulling all these aspects from D&D, the main storyline isn't going to be as combat heavy as you would have like a normal group of adventurers. It's more court intrigue. It's more things of that nature. But there are violent threats in the courts of the Sauron Empire. And you
I like it.
have been trained to deal with them.
And you're okay with my dwarf being based off Violet Crawley from Downton Abbey, right? That's
Absolutely.
okay, because that's
Please make her face off.
that's where I'm going with this. Yeah, it's I practiced the voice, so she's
I'm so excited.
Beautiful.
Oh my goodness.
okay. All right. So with the
Is
by the way,
this being streamed, or is this just like
no, it's gonna be streamed, but it's gonna be like a once a quarter type thing, or once every couple of months, because we're all
Amazing.
super
Right, 'cause court
busy.
intrigue is also really hard to run.
It
and I've never
is.
done it before, so
Yes.
y'all will have to bear with me too.
Yeah. It'll be fun though. I'm teasing. I'm actually looking forward to it. But yes. All right, and I will. That rap will come out, and I will do it in character, in voice, at some way. Probably not all of it, because some of it would be too anachronistic. But I'll figure out a way to make it fun.
Who cares about
I
anachronism?
so look forward to it.
Apparently, you don't from this last Sunday, Cameron. You don't care about
Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
Never have.
All right. So
Hey, it's my world. I get to choose what's an anachronism.
that.
Yeah.
I guess that's true, isn't it? Yes. All right, so Meg, I'm sorry, hold on here. Stupid, I really like this music I have, but it has an ad that plays every 30 minutes here, so let me mute this. So I want to come to you, Meg. I know you had to step away for a moment, and again, I really appreciate you being on with us tonight for the crew. Are there any times where you can think of strategies? Like, I think there are a lot of people that would like to have romance in their games, but number one, is they fear, like, yeah, it's not going to go right. I'm going to mess things up. But then I think the number 2 concern is, how do I do it right? You know, how do I run it in a way that connects with people and makes it, because ultimately I don't want my combat to be hollow. I want my combat to feel so. If you watch how I run my games, and I'm sure I fail at this often, but my effort is to create dynamic, engaging, fearful, threatening combat. Well, if I'm going to play romance, I want that to be meaningful, impactful, and emotionally connecting. What ideas do you have on ways to do that? And look, this is tonight. The primary perspective here is the woman's perspective. D&D. Gary Gygax, Arneson, it's been created and largely dominated by men, and men have tended to, and I'm not trying to get any like tropes and other, but they've tended to be more on the violent side, less on the depth of romance and role play side. If you're talking to, and I don't want to put you on the spot, others can answer this too, Meg. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but how can you, if you have DMs out there that really want to bring this to their game, and they want to do it in a way that's meaningful, impactful, but doesn't get them, banned, in trouble, or hated by their players, how can they do that?
Well, I do feel like I might be the worst one on this panel because I've only been in one D&D romance and I have not dated anyone in real life. So, but I think that definitely make sure you are approaching it with the right intentions. Like we've been talking about, it can even going so far as to like recognizing like if you are making an NPC because you want to ship and you want to have a place in the game, be open about that and say, hey, I want to have a small piece of this game that's not just me DMing, right? And I think asking people, I'm telling you, I don't know. I have been in one game. There was no rent.
Okay, no, but I think actually what you brought up was really, really helpful, Meg. And so I'm going to pull this up on the screen. This is one of the other article comments. And by the way, I know many of you are already on Jay's stream. You can keep Jay's stream up and our stream simultaneously. We will be rating into Jay, but he and I both agree with the idea of keep up both streams and help support the content on both sides. Let me pull this up.
John, Thomas is calling you out in chat.
And what did he say?
He said, I've seen John struggle to romance his own wife in games time and time again.
That is how great the role play is, Thomas. Do not use D&D to explore your own romantic feelings for someone else. I really think that, so this came up in the chat. Twy, you said it. T-Cat, you said it as well. This is so dangerous. Help me, guys. How do we talk about this?
Also, if the reason you're having the romance, even if it's consensual between the two, and you're having the romance because you're also together in real life, can end up making
everyone else at the table uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Because you're not going to make each other uncomfortable, potentially, or you might bring your own drama and your own baggage from your own relationship into the table, or it can get hairy. And that doesn't mean don't romance your actual real life partners. That just means do it with the intent of these characters make sense, not I want to romance my boo.
Yes. Go ahead, Meg.
There is a rule at the table that I play in where you are not allowed to romance your in-person partners because it can cause issues and let's say potentially the possibility of you two breaking up.
I like that.
Severely disrupt, and that happened.
Cue rage.
That happened in our game. Two players broke up, and it. I won't get into it, but it was very messy and ended with a player leaving.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Vivi?
Similar. Yeah. Oh no, I don't know if I would.
Come on, Vivi, you're on my show. You got to dish a little bit. Come on.
Well, it just something. I don't know. Two people in the group. this is where it can get dangerous, and exactly what Meg and Ashlyn was talking about, where these two individuals were in separate relationships outside of the group.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about your ex. No, I wasn't pushing you to go into that. You don't have to.
No, that's okay. Started a romance.
Yeah.
I think it's important too, because I think that's an important part of the romance, right? Because this is what people are worried about, right? Like, it was outside relationships. They had outside relationships of people who were outside of the group, and then did exactly as this post suggested, and kind of butted a romance and didn't set that boundary, and did not follow step 2, as Cameron said, and did not step back and do that. And yeah, so it did not turn out well at all. And,
I see.
Yes, no longer in part of the group. So that's, so again, like those things, I think a lot of the topics that we've kind of touched on with romance in D&D is, communication, respecting boundaries, and being able to talk within your group whether or not this is something that you want, making sure everybody's comfortable as player, as DM, as everything, and just doing those check-ins are so important to make sure that everybody's comfortable on the same page and has a safe place to be vulnerable, to tell stories together. So yeah.
That's well said.
I think, folks, if you've got some feelings, it's a better way than putting them into your D&D game. Just talk to the person. Like, just talk to the person.
Agreed.
If it's not appropriate for you to be talking to that person about that thing, then maybe don't romance them in D&D as a way to obfuscate that. Don't do it.
Not advisable.
But here's the thing. I've had friends who are like, shoot, my, either as the DM, I'm being flirted with by one of my single players, and I'm like, oh, they're so fun. Like, this is really charming. I'm getting to spend all this time with them. I just need to talk to them about this. Those two people have had conversations and been like, hey, I just really enjoy all the time I'm spending with you. And I think you're really great. And then those two people ended up dating, and it's been wonderful for them. I'm like, this can go well. Like, it doesn't, as much as you get to write your narrative in the story, you also get to write your narrative in the real world. And like, it's as collaborative there as it is in the game. Of like, that person might be like, hey, I appreciate that, but I'm not really interested in you in the same way.
Yeah.
And that can really hurt, and that can be hard. But hey, you said the thing that was hard. You did a heroic feat by being honest and open. And if, again, you've crafted an environment that is a space of openness and honesty, the hope is that from there you can be like, hey, no harm, no foul is a vibe I was catching, but I'm an adult and I can take care of my own feelings. And you can move on from there. Or if that's a big deal breaker, find a wrap up spot for the game. Like, this can go well. And even if it ends up not going the way that you hoped it would, that doesn't mean it's going poorly. It's just going differently than planned.
Cameron, the next time you open your mouth and say something I disagree with will be the first time.
Yeah, for real.
I dunked on Robert. No. I'm anti-Robert.
No one's anti you. So we are going to wrap up here in a bit, but I have been so excited for this conversation for some time. All of you are amazing, and I know each of you probably had something that you brought into this game, or this discussion tonight, rather, about the game that was important to you. And I want to make sure we have the opportunity to field any other remaining points. Anyone else have thoughts, comments, concerns, experiences, things that you've seen that you would like to share with each other or the community on how we can make more meaningful romance happen in role-playing games? Because I do think, again, back to point one, chainmail's great, Risk is great, chess is great, but I don't play D&D just for the combat. I play it for the role play and the experience of being a person, and a different person than I am every day when I punch the clock and go work a job and all make the bills and the payments. It is fantasy, it is escapism. How can we make this more meaningful and also something that hits more tables without creating more problems, right? Because we don't want to send people off in a direction where they try something and then they have a big issue because they didn't do it right.
So for me, I don't make friends easy. I never have. And being able to play in D&D and make those connections through romance, through friendships, and that it's helped because, especially with Ashlyn, like just being able to have our characters connected, it made a friendship between us just develop and just go, and it was like, this is great. I don't even know how I did it, but I did it. So you can't be afraid to let things like that develop as well.
What's that old adage? Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can play it completely safe, and you probably will not create depth at your table.
Yeah,
And just be open with your communication for everything at your table. Just talk to each other. It's a game where you do talk all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So have those discussions as real people too, not just as make-believe people.
Mhm. If you find yourself being too uncomfortable to talk about it, don't do it. You cannot roleplay romance, even with NPCs, if you are not willing to talk about how you feel about it, for better or for worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
And that's
good.
okay. Sometimes it's really hard to talk about that kind of stuff, but don't, breed that sort of uncomfortability because you know.
Ah, man, what, Meg? That's actually that kind of hits different, because that's true in all of life and with romance. If you're not comfortable with what you're doing, the other person feels it, and it comes off very disingenuous and very awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, and I think of like, if you can't talk about the high points and the low points, then you can't play the game. Like, and not D&D, but like, you can't play the game of love until you're ready to have like those hard, uncomfortable conversations of like talking to other PCs of like, hey, what would it look like if one of our characters dies, or what would it look like if one of our characters like ends up, not being able to like be in this relationship, or all those things. Talk about the hard stuff. Like, again, this is your trial ground. This is a space where you can try on literally anything you want, within reason.
Yeah, not yes.
Within reason.
Within reason, of course. But like, you get to try on so many new feelings of love and joy and romance and rejection and heartache and heartbreak, and you get to do it safely and with friends, hopefully. I think it's just such a lovely thing of like, when I have friends in real life tell me about like their relationships that are ongoing and going well, that sparks in me a certain amount of joy that I can't quite explain. And so like, getting to watch my friends like in character kind of explore through that, I think is just really delightful. I think it's so fun and so sweet. And I know that it's a rarity, and I know that sometimes it can feel hard and stressful to do, and especially to do well. But I hope that our fear of failure doesn't stop us from wanting to do things that might be challenging. But I hope that potential fear of failure leads us to more openness, honesty, and kindness.
Honestly, I had deep fear of failure for this stream tonight. I did. So, like, no, it's so true.
But it led us to more openness, honesty, and kindness, I think.
Exactly.
I'd say.
So well said. Other thoughts, crew?
I think y'all said it perfectly. Said all of it so eloquently. I could not have said it better myself.
All right. Well, we cannot get through tonight without a little bit more controversy. So, for those that have watched, I think, well, everybody's either watched or played, all of you. What could I do better as a DM to create opportunities for appropriate, meaningful romance in game where it's desired? Again, some people don't want it. There are people in our chat right now that, and by the way, yes, thank you, Thomas. I was responding to TCAT with what I said earlier on the sorry. I think the thread got mixed up, but I was sorry for what TCAT was saying that they had experienced. But what, I think with BlueBox, what are you laughing about so hard, Rachel? What did I say? Did I say something stupid?
Commented, be willing to call Quick Hot as something you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say it. I was gonna say you need to flirt with Thomas.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's so A, that's not no, and then B, he's 5 foot. No, and no, no. That's not right. Like I can have. Okay, see, all right, there you did it. You did it.
Oh, now he's getting shy.
Okay, to answer your question,
I'm
John,
blushing. Yes, I am.
I always ask this question, but I think as a DM, I think you always allow us a lot of space and breathing room to have these natural moments of RP. As a DM, and I think that's very difficult and really hard, especially as on stream and stuff like that, when you're kind of battling a bunch of different things like your sound and your audio and this and that, and your players just kind of going awry.
Yes.
But in between combat and stuff like that, there are a lot of downtime moments where you're always really good at making it feel natural, in the sense where we are able to have that, like I said, space and breathing room to be able to kind of RP with each other and divulge a little bit of our backstories in a natural setting, and things like that, and have our moments to kind of let those romances or just, again, divulging of backstories happen. So I don't think that there is anything really you can really add to that. The balance is pretty good, I find, with between combat, storyline, and allowing your players to also be a part of the storytelling as well.
Oh, thank you, Vivi. I do appreciate that. It's funny, I had someone in Discord today tell me their one-shot story they had written out, and I told them I think it needed a little more balance with the combat, because I think that's really important in the game. But I'm also not asking the question just so you guys can tell me I'm great. I do like critiques. I like, you don't get better unless people tell you where you can get better. So again, I'm going to open it up to the crew here, understanding that we all have different preferences, we all have different perspectives, but is there anything any of you have seen within the BlueBox game that you think, hey John, if you adjusted this, it would make natural progression of, let's not even call it romance, let's call it meaningful relationships, deep and meaningful relationships that could be more brought to the fore in your games?
I think one thing that I've really enjoyed at your table, John, is that I think for me, especially when I'm like in a GM or DM seat, I feel very nervous of like, man, I got to get to all these story beats before the time's up. I think you have done a really good job with letting your PCs take some of that lead while still creating like a really interesting story. Like, we've had several sessions straight in Tears of Aird where like there has been no fighting, and like for some people that's like, I could never do that, but I think for like us as PCs, we could spend an awful lot of time just talking and we would be perfectly happy. But I think you bring it's this delicate, almost like tide-like push-pull of like pushing in that danger to make that movement happen. Pulling it back for certain periods of time to like give the characters that space to breathe, for that richness to develop. So then when the danger comes back, there's more danger because now you've seen these characters pull closer. Yeah. And that, delicious.
Agreed. Yes, delicious.
A little snack.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
I know that you said, John, that you don't want to.
No, your guys are doing exactly what I said not to do.
Yeah, and you want criticism, but truly, like, you are one of the most fantastic DMs I've had the pleasure of being at a table with, and I think it would, if I were to have to critique, it would be something I'd have to think about for like a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there is
just brought some heat that was very good.
What did he say? Okay, I would say simply add, what is something that sees or feeling about the world around them, other characters, sometimes the feelings. Don't I do that already? Wait a minute.
I think he means pulling it to like another person instead of just the world around.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. That's good, Thomas.
Like,
how dare you
I
actually say
imagine-
something helpful?
like, I could imagine like two characters sitting across each other from like a campfire and being like, "What are you thinking about this other person?
That makes
now? What are
sense.
you feeling
Yeah.
about them?" Like
More
that.
dinosaurs? No, that is not
I
the
love
answer. T-Cat did say a marrying of melons should be legalized. I
Yes,
think
thank you.
that's for
Yeah.
you.
Allow that. Or just melon stands in general, okay? The
I'm sorry. I don't seem to be getting the support for
availability
this.
of melons.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said the lack of availabilities for melons for Rizia was very disheartening.
Yeah.
You can't start
I
me at a melon stand and then never have them appear ever again.
That's Chekhov's melon.
yes. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But I'm sorry. I don't know why I've not gotten more support for my WotC. They stole Rizia. You cannot tell me the main character in Honor Among Thieves, who looks like Rizia, looks like Rizia's artwork, has an axe that turns into this golden glowing axe, uses potatoes instead of melons. I know Luke Gygax knows who we are. They stole that. I'm teasing Luke. Don't sue me, please.
Kind of. That's my character.
It is your character for sure. All right, closing thoughts. Anyway, but thank you again. And really, like, I am open. Maybe it's not comfortable on a stream like this, but if you have thoughts, any of you, Thomas, that's good. Any others, send those to me. I don't believe you get better just by hearing what you do well. I believe you get better by hearing what you don't do well, and I'm always open to critiques. So any of that you guys have, any of you, please let me know. I want to say thank you again for joining us tonight for what I think was an amazing show. I'm watching the chat, and I guess as I'm giving you,
Thank you.
yeah, I'm giving you a moment to collect your final thoughts. Any of you will have the final word. Many of you have shared, even in the chat, and I know I missed some of them, your own stories, struggles you've had, things you've experienced at tables, and ultimately, I want the game that we play here at BlueBox. Yes, we all have our different perspectives in life, but I think we are a table and a stream. We want to tell great stories. We want to support all people, and we want this to be a place that you can tell your story. And yes, sometimes two stories may conflict, right? You may want to tell a different story than someone else. Then we have to work through that together at the table. And that's why I do think the DM has to be so critical at that table to making sure that they can adjudicate and balance these stories where maybe two people don't want to tell the same story.
Mm-hmm.
I did it again, huh? That was another mic drop. Crap. How do I keep doing that? Okay, final thoughts as we get ready to raid to Jay. I want to say, Vivi, thank you for joining us tonight. I know it was short notice for you, but you were absolutely awesome. Courtney, we miss you and look forward to having you back. Ashlyn, when are we starting this Jane Austen chicanery?
No idea. Fair. I mean, world building wise, I'm pretty good because I've been running this world for 3 years. And I have NPCs from the campaign that I've been running that are actually from the Empire 8,000 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So I
Crazy.
have things written from the actual like royal perspective because I wrote my campaign for 9 months before we even started playing for 3 years.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I have a book.
You're not ready for my Violet Crawley. You're not.
Bring it.
For all the hassle you've given me, you better be ready.
Yeah.
Now you're setting the
Go.
expectation so
Just
high.
wait, John.
Just wait, yes. Meg, Rachel, Ashlyn, Cameron, Amanda, of course, Vivi, thank you all so much. I'm going to give you one last chance. I'm going to set the raid up now for Jay, kicking the raid off in just a few seconds. Anyone have any other final thoughts or anything you would like to share with the Mad Chatters and those who have shared this couple hours with us tonight?
I hope listening to the conversation, people feel more comfortable having these discussions, that a lot of fears have been assuaged, because that's the whole point. We want to make people feel more comfortable. And I know me personally, my DMs are always open. If you have situation questions, if you're like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
approach this, like I'm gonna only speak for myself because I can only speak for myself. But if you do have any of these questions, I know that I'm a resource. I'm sure these other wonderful ladies are also super open and available, but I'm not gonna make that assumption for everybody.
And also, thank you for being here, because you all being here has been super encouraging, and sharing your own stories as we're talking about ours is just so great to see. And it's truly wonderful. You guys are great. The best Matt chatters, best community ever.
Yes.
And thanks for being curious about this. I know that some people were like, I'm not into the romance game. But you're still here and you're still listening, and I think that's really cool. I think it's cool to be curious about stuff. I think it's cool to learn new things. And it's so cool that you guys are so open and curious about this. So, yeah.
All right. And with that, we're going to get set up our raid. And again, ladies, thank you to all of you. It was my honor to spend the night with you tonight again. I do look forward to playing a game together here very soon. And I look forward to continuing this dialogue. I think the perspective is very critical. And I want, ultimately, this is not different than the kinds of games I played when I was 10, 11 years old. We had, well, 10-year-old boys romance, but that's what we did. I mean, we in our own ways it was. I can't, we were where we were, but the game was never just the, the tabletop combat stuff. It was always about the human experience, the personal experience. And when I created BlueBox, it was about telling great stories. And I think you all have helped me tell great stories. And I'm really, really appreciative of all of you tonight. I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you again very, very soon.
We're also very appreciative of you for giving us a platform to talk about this in a space too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, John.
Stop it.
Yo, so-and-so.
And the raid happened. There it is. And